So last week, the Ghana Football Association President, Keto Kweku, granted an interview to us at CFM and addressed some issues. I mean, primarily he says he agrees, as if he has a choice, actually, he doesn't, with the president's call that the budget for the Black Stars will be made public. And this is a directive that's been given to the Minister of Sports and Recreation. The challenge is, the GFA President also said, but in his personal opinion, he thought that this preoccupation with the budget was needless and that it was a waste of time, considering that there are other weightier issues for people to consider. I'm sure the video, when it gets played, that's exactly what you will hear.
Our Black Stars budget or our national team budget public?
I don't have a problem.
You okay?
I don't have a problem at all. But I ask myself one question.
Yeah.
Why?
He also stated that, private entities like the radio station that was interviewing him and some other public entities did not necessarily share their budgets with the public. And so why then were people obsessed with the GFA's budget, seeing that it's a private entity? Sometimes I really think the GFA president would do himself favors by not speaking on certain issues or expressing certain thoughts on his mind, because what it does is to almost insult the public and make it seem as if the public don't know what they are about. And I explain exactly what I mean by that. It's very easy to run to the legalities and say, this is what the law says, this is what the law doesn't say. But in between all of that is what we call good governance. And we've seen over the last few years that people want to have ethical governance, they want to have transparency. The same people that the GFA ask to attend local matches and to go to the stadiums are the same people who ask about Black Stars and their budgets. So on the one hand, it's okay for people to express their opinions about other things. But the moment it comes to money, it becomes a problem. And it becomes needless and a waste of people's time. Time that is their own personal time. But I think when you invert the argument, you realize that people ask about the Black Stars budgets because they have been hurt enough. I've often said that the relationship between Ghanaian football supporters and the Ghana Football Association and the national teams, particularly the Black Stars, have become toxic over the years. People invest so much emotion, people invest so much attention and resources to support the national teams. And what have they had in return over the last few years? Failure to qualify for the last Nations Cup, first round exits in the previous Nation Cups. And then when we have qualified to the last World Cup, how well did we do? We won one match and then we limped out of that World Cup lamely. And as we go into the 2026 World Cup, of course, after what's happened over the years, people will be interested in knowing what the budget is, to know whether it's value for money. So is the GFA a private entity? Well, we have to get into the specifics. And yes, the Ghana Football Association is a private entity, but it's a private entity unlike any private entity. Legally speaking, the Ghana Football Association is what we would describe as a company limited by guarantee. And under Ghanaian law, this means that it has no shareholders, it cannot distribute profits, and it exists to promote a specific purpose, in this case, football. But not just football. It's also important to realize that the Ghana Football Association is a monopoly to the extent that, based on what FIFA has instituted, where you have one football authority, unlike we've had in some countries where there's been a split, and FIFA usually recognizes one. They are the ones seized with the obligations and the authority to organize football in this country, to fill the national team that will play under the flag of Ghana. So that raises a clear paradox on this matter. And I think that paradox should not be lost on the Ghana Football Association president, its executive, members of the association, or any other person who supports football in this country. The paradox is that on the one hand, it is a private legal vehicle, but then also it holds the de facto national monopoly. It is the only body recognized by FIFA and Ghana as a state to represent the Republic of Ghana at international competitions, which means they are the only ones who can say they are constituting a team that we call the Black Stars. And all of us would then have to fall under. We can't go and bring another Ghana Football Association and say this one should bring a national team. It can only be one football association. Now, when that happens, it elevates the organization beyond just an ordinary private entity into an organization in which we have a vested national interest. Then comes the other matter. How are the national teams in Ghana funded? And this is perhaps the strongest rebuttal to the Ghana Football Association's president's position that they are a private entity and perhaps therefore absolve themselves of all form of scrutiny or criticism. The money that runs the national team is the taxpayers' money. When we go for World Cup campaigns, the monies that are used to pay bonuses, per diems, coefficients, and the like, and the travel cost comes from the taxpayer. So how can we, on the one hand, take taxpayers' money to spend on our national teams and then claim that because we are a private entity, nobody has the right to scrutinize us or force us to publish budget for a national team that's going to play football? This is clearly a contradiction, and there's no way in which Keto Kreku or anybody who is within the inner enclave of the Ghana Football Association can stand up anywhere with this argument and win. Because if you accept taxpayers' money for airfares, per diems, appearance fees, it becomes both legal and ethical that you account for that money. It's no longer a private matter when you are using money that comes from all of us. Now comes the issue of governance. A few years ago, when FIFA had their scandals, Transparency International published a report where they stated very clearly that the level of accountability and governance within FIFA was at an all-time low. And since then, FIFA themselves have been undergoing a process of reform. So one of those that they have implemented is what they call the Forward Program, where they have moved to strict levels of transparency, requiring member associations to publish their audited financial statements. Now, we all know that despite what the FA says, there's a commingling of the funds that comes from government and what the FA raises. So perhaps it should not be out of place if the FA wants to go that way, for them to delineate and tell us which ones come from private funds that they have raised and which ones come to government. If they decide not to account even for the private funds and the sponsorship funds that have come into the Akiti, they cannot run away from the fact that the monies that have come from the state must be accounted for. In any case, what's the big deal if you tell us that this is how much you spent? 12 years ago, in 2014, we had a huge scandal at Brazil when money had to be flown to play the Black Stars. And it was for that reason that the GFA Commission was set up. And part of the recommendations of the GFA Commission was to ensure that because public funds are being used by the Ghana Football Association, they are accounted for. Indeed, the GFA Commission report recommended that 3 months after every single tournament that the Black Stars or any national team participates in, there had to be a value for money audit to determine whether the money that the state had invested in the team had been well spent. Well, I can tell you for a fact that government over the years have acceded to that particular recommendations. But the fact that they haven't done it doesn't mean that the right thing is being done by successive sports administrations. It's become a fight when journalists ask, please, how much did you spend at this particular tournament? And suddenly it becomes a state secret that must only be submitted to Parliament or the Parliamentary Committee for Sports, and that people cannot know. Why? Why is this such a big deal? And for Mr. Keto Kreku, I wonder why he cries wolf. He keeps saying, why us? Why is the FA under scrutiny? I'm sorry to say, Ket, but boxing doesn't get the sort of money that your football national teams get. Athletics does not get anywhere near the monies that football gets. When it suits the FA, we say that football is the passion of the nation, and let's bring back the love. The love that people show for the game includes asking questions. That is the love language of football fans in the country. And so if you are ready to take the passion and to take the monies that people are willing to waste to go and support the Black Stars, you have to be ready also to take up the question of what the budget contains. And I think really the FA has missed an opportunity, because if the FA were proactive enough to be publishing these things, it wouldn't take a directive from the President of Ghana to the Minister of Sports and Recreation for this to be published. I think the FA has missed an opportunity to position itself as a very transparent entity, as an entity that is connected to the passion of the fans and is willing to do the things that will please the fans in the most ethical manner, but the things that would continue to whip people up to support the Black Stars. Ket can be forgiven for many things. Of course, we all know that when we exited the Nations Cup a few years ago, he did not apologize because he felt no reason why he should apologize. This is the same person who is asking people to stop wasting their time by asking this. And I agree. In many ways, apart from qualifying for the World Cup, what has Keto Kreku and his administration achieved for Ghana football? especially given the lofty heights that they promised to take Ghana football to. And I'm not talking about the personal appointments as CAF Vice President. I'm talking about the levels that Ghana belong to. Over the years, football has become so bad in terms of what we achieve that we have become like lions who have learned how to eat grass. The football fans in Ghana have accepted or have learned to accept mediocrity. Well, not everybody is willing to accept mediocrity because we know where our football has been. There was a time when being at the Nations Cup semi-final and final came at a canter, and people had legitimate expectation that once Ghana was in the competition, if it was the AFCON, Ghana was going to the semi-final. There was a time when people felt that if we showed up at the World Cup, minimum one match winning would be the basic for us. After all, in 2006, we went beyond the first round. In 2010, we went as far as the quarterfinals. But it appears as if over the period, we have been gaslighted as football fans. And we have been manipulated to the extent that we keep reducing our expectation. I'm sorry to say that's not how things should be. So if the GFA still thinks people would accept anything, Boket and the Ghana Football Association need to wake up and smell the coffee. People no longer will take things at face value. And that's how come the World Cup, the build-up towards the World Cup and everything around it must show certain levels of accountability. So here, I would say it very clearly. If the FA is not willing to publish these things, and yes, we know that the ministry has been given instructions, but if the ministry is not going to do it, then here's what we are going to do. We are going to file a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Sports and Recreation. And we are going to ask them to disclose, among other things, a breakdown of the budget for the Black Stars. And it's simple. They are approved budgets by the Ministry of Sports and the Ministry of Finance for the 2026 World Cup. The player and staff appearance fee, the daily per diems for players, technical staff and the GFA officials, the travel and accommodation costs, specifically the charter flights and the hotel bookings, the logistics and the miscellaneous, and among other things. The other things we'll be interested in knowing is the GFA management fees. How much will the members of the GFA's management committee be receiving? We would also be asking how much sponsorship has been raised from corporate Ghana for the purposes of the Black Stars participation in the World Cup and any other information that is relevant. Because it gets to a point where people get tired. They get tired of the pedantry. They get tired of being patronized. They get tired of being insulted. And they get tired of being treated as people who do not think. I think it's about time the journalists within this country and the footballing public who have made Ghana football what it is get the due respect. We are thinking supporters. We are thinking journalists. We are not stomach journalists or stomach supporters. And we refuse to be taken for granted. So, Mr. Keto Kreku, if you won't change your approach, we may have to force you to change your approach because your office requires accountability and transparency. And in the interest of good governance, that's exactly how the GFA should be able to treat football fans and football journalists in this country. That's my peace of mind, and I'll leave it here for now.